This will be all over. This will be all over. Yeah. Oh, excellent. You want to sit on that? Oh, I saw that earlier.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Rossi, Professor of Psychiatry in the department, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Beth Stoneking, who will in turn introduce our colleagues and members of her panel. Let me first read this about Dr. Stoneking and her work, and then she will fill us in on the rest. She has been an assistant professor in the Department of Family and Community Medicine here at the U of A, in the College of Medicine, since '97. She started the Recovery Through Integration Support and Empowerment program, RISE unit of DFCM in 1998, shortly after she came. She is currently the principal investigator of the Certified Recovery Support Specialist Program in partnership with the Community Partnership of Southern Arizona. In 8 years, this program has seen over 440 people graduate and go on to obtain jobs in multiple agencies all over Pima County and the state. Dr. Stoneking began training persons with serious mental illness in the late 80s through a NIMH CSP grant. Trained peers were hired and employed in Sacramento County's clinical case management system. Further, she was awarded a SAMHSA CMHS grant to establish a crisis residential alternative to civil commitment program, which in turn established a crisis residential facility in an unlocked home-like setting, where 80% of the staff were those with lived experience of psychiatric and or substance use disorders, who selected and worked in partnership with professionals. Dr. Stoneking is also PI, Executive Director of the UA RISE Health and Wellness Center and co-principal investigator of the research evaluation pilot of the center's first program, Camp Wellness. Camp Wellness is a program for persons with serious mental illness who are on Access Medicaid, focusing on the integration of mental health and health through education and skills training. The mission of Camp Wellness is to increase the overall quality of life and lifespan of individuals with serious mental illness. Dr. Stoneking has taught both in class and web-based courses in psychiatric rehabilitation at the university for undergraduates and graduate students. She serves as the chair of the United States Psychiatric Rehabilitation Association Education and Training Committee. She has trained and consulted with numerous agencies and projects over the past 30 years, including doing organizational consultation with attorneys, attorney firms, school boards, Protection and Advocacy Incorporated in California, expert witness for various attorney firms on behalf of individuals with serious mental illness who are experiencing possible discrimination, and so on, as she has dual PhDs in both clinical and organizational psychology. And the topic of the presentation this afternoon is what is our role in recovery and resilience. Individuals with serious mental illness share their journeys, victim or victor. Dr. Stoneking.
Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Beth, and presenting with me today is, in the middle, Aaron Dion Foster. He goes by Arrow. Arrow is a certified recovery support specialist. And after Arrow, there will be Linda Hicks. And Linda Hicks works at Cope Behavioral Health Services and is a certified recovery support specialist. And then after she presents, we'll hear from Jean Bishop. And Jean Bishop is a certified recovery support specialist. They have a different name for that at the Veterans Administration here in Tucson. And so I thank you, and I thank you for coming today. There are some handouts out on the table. And the first handout is Empirical Data Supports Recovery. And this is a handout that shows 7 longitudinal studies that were conducted over many years with a large number of individuals with serious mental illnesses. They were conducted in the United States, in Switzerland, in Japan, and in Germany. The Ogawa study looked at individuals who were diagnosed with schizophrenia. And what you'll see is the criteria used in those empirical studies. And what they found was, in fact, 49 to 64% of people with serious mental illnesses, in fact, do recover and regain a life of purpose and meaning. And 8 years ago, I was blessed to be awarded the Recovery Support Specialist Program contract from the Community Partnership of Southern Arizona, which is a local REBA. And tomorrow, we will be graduating the Recovery Support Specialist Institute 28. And that will bring our numbers to date up to over 460 individuals who have graduated from the Institute. There are papers out there, early papers, written by Jason Malfate et al., that talks about the Recovery Support Specialist Institute. But everyone who goes through the Institute are members of CPSA's System of Care, and they go through 60 hours of in-class training. And that is 7 full days of training plus homework. There's 2 days of training 1 week, 3 days of training the second week, and then 2 days of training the third week. We felt it important to spread the training out so that individuals had the time to absorb and to complete a lot of material. And then, after graduation from the Institute, which will happen tomorrow at 4, individuals get employed in a behavioral health agency in Pima County. And after they're employed, providing peer support, then they return to every week, Friday from 8:30 to 10:30. Beverly McGuffin, who is a registered nurse with a master's, who is a psychiatric nurse, is sitting here in the audience today. She is a co-trainer. And then Daniel Steffi, who works for the Community Partnership of Southern Arizona. The 3 of us have been trainers for all 8 years. And he is a person with lived experience. And we facilitate these 2-hour practicums. And those 2-hour practicum meetings are a place where individuals who have learned a lot of knowledge, a lot of skills, and learned about attitudes, and in the Institute, are in the workplace now, and they're learning how to apply those knowledge, skills, and attitudes on their individualized job. And so it's a group process. The practicum is 2 hours, and to become certified, you must complete 8 out of 12 practicums and get a satisfactory evaluation from your supervisor. And the Recovery Support Specialist Institute has been a tremendous success. And peer support is not only happening here in Pima County and the state of Arizona, but it's national and it's international. And one of the things that I think is really important is to remember that as at that as providers, I think we'll hear from the panelists, that is our responsibility to realize that people who are diagnosed are not their illness. People are not schizophrenics. They are not borderlines. They are not bipolar. They are individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia, people diagnosed with bipolar disorder, people diagnosed with social phobia. So it's always person-first language. It's respectful, because the ultimate goals of recovery are expanding people's roles far beyond that of a mental patient. These are employees, their fathers, their mothers, their sisters, their brothers, their students. We are all many roles in our lives. And for many years, individuals were kept in the behavioral health system and were told prophecies of doom, told that they would spend a life coping, taking psychiatric medication, which is one very important tool, but it's certainly not the only tool. It's just one tool in your recovery toolbox. And that they would likely not go to school again, and they would likely never work. Now, when people hear that kind of stuff from those of us who are in paid positions with position power and titles, they listen to us. And I don't know about you, but I haven't met anyone who ever wanted to grow up and have a psychiatric disorder or a substance use disorder. So when it happens, people usually do not seek first episode treatment. They usually experience those symptoms for an extended period of time, because we grow up in a society where there's a lot of stigma, prejudice, and discrimination. And it has been my personal experience of over 30 years working in this field that mental illness and substance use disorders are the last bastions of stigma in healthcare. There are no other areas of healthcare that come with such discrimination and prejudice and such ignorance. And so it is our responsibility to know that while 49 to 68% recover, that we cannot predict who is going to recover and who is not. So we must look at every individual that we work with as though they have the potential to recover and gain a life of purpose and meaning. And when we focus on growing an individual's strengths and talents, rather than talking about their problems and talking about their symptoms, then what happens is those strengths and talents begin to shine. And we see symptom reduction, and we see that there is need for less medication, and we see people returning to learn again, to have some self-esteem, and to move forward in their life. And so today it is a distinct privilege to introduce you to our first panelist, Erin Dion Foster. Errol?
Hi, I am a student here at the University of Arizona. I'm a graduate student in the Department of Disability and Psychoeducational Studies in the College of Education. I will be graduating in 2013 with my Master's in Rehabilitation Counseling. I work for RISE at the University, where I am a teacher's assistant in the 2 psych rehab courses that Dr. Stonekin spoke about earlier. I also just finished co-authoring a book chapter for the United States Psych Rehab Association, a competencies chapter for the Best Practices Manual textbook that they are coming out with. I also assist with other manuscripts in progress, and I assist to get the Recovery Support Specialist Institute up and going when they're getting ready to present and have another class come in. I help gather the materials. I'm a behavioral health tech, a volunteer behavioral health tech at Cactus Counseling, where I work with people with domestic violence, substance abuse, and mental health disorders. I also am a volunteer group facilitator with SMN Christian Counseling, where we are rolling out a new pilot program to work with children of parents who are in treatment, so that the children get to understand what the parents are going through and learn those good coping skills themselves. Because we know that children of alcoholics and substance use, people with alcoholism and substance use disorder, do have a greater chance of growing up to develop those themselves. I am also a live-in caregiver for a gentleman who is an engineer from Hughes Aircraft and a Korean War veteran. I am the webmaster and substitute secretary for the Arizona Psychiatric Rehabilitation Association, and I am just newly a committee member on the Pima County Stigma Reduction Committee, which is a mandated committee for all the regional behavioral health authorities in the state of Arizona. I am also an advocate for behavioral health awareness and change. I have held 2 large mental illness awareness programs on this campus. In 2007, we were the largest mental illness awareness program in the United States on any campus. I am also, along with my peers, a certified recovery support specialist when anyone, anywhere needs me to be. And I'm a member of the American Counseling Association, the American Rehab Counseling Association, the United States Psych Rehab Association, the Arizona Psych Rehab Association, and one more, the National Association of Peer Specialists and the Human Race.
And for our second panelist, we'll listen to Linda Hicks.
Hello, I'm employed at COPE Community Services at a clinical site, and my official title is RSS2. I pretty much am responsible for myself and have productivity requirements just like any other employee. My function is not only to provide living proof that recovery and meaningful enrollment for someone who received or is currently receiving services from a public health care facility is possible, but also to provide valuable experiential knowledge to assist in planning of and delivery of healthcare services. I may be viewed by some clients as a more credible teacher because I've lived it. And most importantly, I'm admitting to it. RSSs have been instrumental at COPE in inspiring hope for recovery, teaching self-employment, self-empowerment, advocating self-responsibility, and have had successes in encouraging members to discover and persevere their own meaningful life goals. At my site, I'm responsible for researching and putting together the materials for 11 weekly hour-and-a-half groups, 7 of which I facilitate. And the groups include skills in understanding personal values, true friendships, boundaries, and assertiveness for improved self-esteem, whole health for the mind, spirit, and body, cognitive solutions and information for mental health, alcohol and substance recovery, work skills as related to communication and acceptable deportment for improved confidence. I also schedule weekly one-on-ones or appointments for individuals for support and or counseling, and have found the use of motivational interviewing very helpful, as this technique helps a person find their own solutions. When a solution or idea comes from within, the individual is more apt to follow through because it makes sense to them, and they're known accessible resources. Members may also schedule meetings with me to learn how to use a smart recovery tool to work out an emotional problem or a situation, or they may wish to know how to become an RSS, how to search the internet, how to use a computer, need advice about local resources, how to create a budget, and so forth. My job also sometimes requires that I act as a liaison between case managers, members, and providers, or sit in appointments in a pinch if I have the time to do so. So suffice it to say, I don't lack for things to do.
Thank you, Linda. And for our third panelist, we'll hear from Jean Bishop.
I'm retired Air Force, and I currently work at the VA as a volunteer peer support provider. Of course, they call me a peer education provider. They also called me a peer mentor, and then they decided somebody has that job in the union, and they became upset because a volunteer was actually a peer mentor and not being paid, and she was a mental patient. And this was apparently insulting and very degrading for a person who has that job and is paid. So I was told there's a legal imperative that I never use the title again. And they declared me to be a professional or a peer education volunteer, which, you know, the military likes to have a lot of acronyms, so that sounds like a peeve to me. The place that I work is a PRRC, also an acronym I hate. It stands for Psychosocial Rehabilitation Resource Center. I have to write it down because I don't remember things I hate. I think of it as a mental health wellness recovery center because that is what we do. And if you tell somebody that you're attending the psychosocial, they hear the word psycho, they think of the movie, and they have no clue why they would possibly want to be standing here listening to you. And I don't find that to be particularly healthy for anybody. The program is voluntary. A person has to want to be there, and they can resign at any moment. Just get up and walk out. No problem. They have to have a GAF score of less than 50, but they have to be capable of receiving cognitive instruction, being able to understand a cognitive development of skills. And we do skills classes such as social skills, anger management, wellness education, medication education. And basically, we give them the skills to grow and to become more resilient. I teach a RAP class, Wellness Recovery Action Plan. And my main role is to walk in and be a living example that you can have a serious mental illness like I do and be a competent adult human being.
Thank you, Jean. Now, these all sound like incredibly competent people, right? Accomplished. So now I've asked them if they would be willing to share what we refer to as their dark days, so that you know how resilient they are. So, our first presenter will be Erin Dion Foster.
I'm going to stand and do this. This is the first time that I have ever told my story outside of a survivor group. So if I need to take a few moments, please bear with me there. My recovery started about 44 years ago when I stopped being a victim and became a survivor. My early childhood was spent in a house filled with domestic violence and substance abuse. I had a very intimate relationship with my father's fist and his violent temper. The domestic violence consisted of emotional, physical, and incestuous sexual abuse that lasted for 3 years. When I was removed from this environment and we moved to California to live with my maternal grandmother, I was, of course, lost. I had no idea what this loving house that I was moving into was supposed to be like, and I couldn't comprehend what it was. I couldn't adapt to that kind of living environment. By the age of 6, this is when we moved, I had already been Ritalin'd. That's what I call it, taking Ritalin. I'd been physically restrained. I'd already had experience with alcohol and other drugs, my stomach being pumped for the first time for alcohol at the age of 2.5. This, of course, undoubtedly, it stunted my social growth. I didn't know what friendship meant. People were not to be trusted. They were to be questioned and ignored if possible. I was considered improper and unseemly and most often considered sexually inappropriate for my age. Most of the memories from the time of 6 to the time of 14 are completely gone for me. When I tell my stories about growing up and during those times in grade school and in middle school, I have to tell them from the perspective of someone else. Because I was living in the moment I was surviving every second. I was living in fear all the time. The first recorded school incident of alcohol abuse was in the 4th grade when my teacher used to sit me at the back of the class, almost inside of the rolling closets that we had in the back of the class, because I smelled of alcohol. I want to add something that I didn't do in rehearsal for this was somebody questioned me about that. Well, how did that happen? I grew up in a very small town in northeast Kansas. This was in the early 70s, and my grandmother was a social elite whose husband had been the sheriff of the place, and so it just wasn't talked about. It was like, okay, let's just deal with it off to the side. Flashbacks were my frequent enemy and companion. I could smell the individuals from that early age. I can remember their clothing in detail. I can tell you what the patterns of their shirts looked like. The tastes were vivid. My surroundings, to me, would completely change. If I were to have one here, I would not see seats or anything. The windows and the curtains and the drapes and the couches would all start appearing. The lights would start to dim. I'd get that amber glow, and I could smell smoke. I would usually sit in a state of shock with my mouth wide open, knowing that if I could just throw up, I would come out of it, but never able to. Many times I was found under the kitchen sink, which was the safe place for me. And I was always hypervigilant, jumping at the very smallest thing, any sound. I was very paranoid. This made it very easy for me to dive into my studies. Friendships were out of the question for me. I was often not allowed on the playground because of my actions. And so I became well ahead of my peers in my academic work. When other kids were learning to write the alphabet, I was trying to teach them cursive. I was on and off the streets in those later years. During that period, I would leave at home many times. I'd return. I did finish my schooling there. My first experience with prostitution was when I was 14 years old on one of my outings from house. And oddly enough, that relationship made sense to me. I understood that one. And I'm going to take a breath. I spent the next 20 years practicing a lot of those coping mechanisms. I never got too close to anybody. I drank where most people would go out and meet their friends after work to drink and socialize. I would drink at home to go out so I could socialize. I was never myself. I was always what you wanted me to be, what would be easiest for me to be, and what would make me fit in the best. I engaged in a lot of risky behaviors, and I had multiple suicide attempts. The very first one that I received help for was after my son's death in 1987. Now, I want to say that this doesn't mean that I didn't accomplish anything during these years. This is where the resiliency comes in. During all this time, I graduated from business college with a diploma in data processing. I graduated with honors from my high school. I apprenticed as a sous chef in San Francisco and later went on to be a restaurant manager, a restaurant consultant, and a banquet manager. And then in 1997, I got a DUI, and I was ordered into a treatment program. And in that program, I almost never spoke. I was sitting in a room filled with about 20 other men who had been arrested for DUI. Many of them smelled of alcohol. You can imagine the flashbacks that I had during those times. But I finally went up to the counselor and said I needed to have some one-on-ones. And her response to me, and I say this because I want to bring this up because she's listening, is that she said, I've been waiting for you. So that was the first turning point in my recovery. The second turning point was when I entered the behavioral health system in 2002. And I was put on medication. I've been on Zyprexa, Seroquel, Abilify, Thorazine, Zoloft, Ativan, Valium, and Klonopin. Do you get all that? The turning point came when my case manager believed what I was telling them. And the other turning point at that time came was when my psychiatrist, when I told him that I had gone off my meds and I had just spent 5 days in the psych ward, And for me, when I felt really bad and I was apologizing, he said, "You don't have to be perfect. I never asked you to be perfect. What did you learn?" The third turning point was when I was in one of these psych rehab courses here at the university, and I just had to make a comment, so I raised my hand and I said, "Listen, I'm SMI," and that's as far as I got. The professor informed me right then and there that I was not SMI, that I was a lot more than that, and if I remember correctly, I had to come up with a few other things that I was. So now my support system is very large. And like I said, I'm an advocate for behavioral health reform. I use a 12-step program as part of my support system. I have a counselor with a great organization here, Southern Arizona Center Against Sexual Assault. I have a whole new set of family, friends, and, of course, my RSS colleagues. And in 2010, I titrated off of all my medications, and now I use my recovery program consists of support and wellness.
Thank you, Errol, for your courage. Now we'll hear from Linda Hicks.
I have a form of social phobia and probably have had it all my life. However, I was only diagnosed about 12 years ago. I undoubtedly have a number of other accompanying disorders, and I kind of noticed that they travel in multiples. But since one diagnosis was enough for me to work with, I found it too discomforting to insist on more. So I'm sure you can appreciate my reasoning now. For instance, I know I have absolutely no sense of direction. I take the bus everywhere and consequently have lots of people get directions from, of course, whenever I work up the nerve to ask them. I had a hard time learning to read and write cursive lettering because my teachers thought I was developmentally challenged. They told me not to worry about it, so I didn't. However, one day I found some interesting books in the school library about the life of an elephant king named Babar, but they were written in cursive. Since I really wanted to be able to read the stories, I taught myself how to read and write cursive by studying the Babar books and even created one of my own, just for practice. I have never been able to master touch typing, and believe me, I've tried, and have been given lots of well-meaning advice. I'm slow but persistent and have gained a lot of patience, which is a good thing because my job requires a lot of typing. So I hunt and pick, hit and miss, but I get the job done. The biggest thing that took some getting used to was that it took me a gazillion times longer to do stuff than the people around me. Most everyone else gets stuff done, and then they're off doing some other stuff. And I'm still doing the same stuff. Okay, a long time ago, I decided that my brain just works differently, and since I can at least derive satisfaction from completing a task done well, then I made peace with just being slower. I am still a worthwhile person and have useful contributions to make. So let's go back to my social phobia aspect here. In elementary school, I pretty much kept to myself except for the occasional peer who approached and befriended me. Up until about the third grade, teachers believed I was mentally slow because I was a poor student. I repeated the first grade but have no memory of that first year other than something that was kind of circumstantial. In my second year of the first grade, I remember seeing the words cat and dog written on the board, which I was sitting really close to, and remember thinking, I remember those words. It was later discovered that I was nearsighted, which accounted for some of my assumed slowness. I was fitted with glasses, but still did poorly in my studies. I remember feeling very uncomfortable and awkward around my classmates and wanted to drop out of school in the third grade. Well, obviously that wasn't going to be happening. Okay, so because my father was in the military, we relocated a lot, and when I was in the third grade, we moved to a school that had a therapist who ran me through a battery of tests. It was discovered that I had above average intelligence and was most likely decided that my lack of social interaction was due to shyness and my poor grades to boredom. So in the third grade, I was put into more advanced classes. School became very interesting, and I began to excel. Since I still felt out of place around others, I used my schoolwork as an excuse to give up pretty much all social interaction except for friendly acquaintances in school. Interestingly, I liked people. I just felt really uncomfortable interacting with them. By high school, I had pretty much given up social activities, both inside and out of school. I went through high school and college with my nose buried in my studies. I truly had no idea when social functions occurred, and certainly I did not date. I remember being terrified whenever classmates invited me to study with them and would have to figure out an excuse to beg off. I did, however, make the honor societies in high school and college, and in 1982 I received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Graphic Design from here, the University of Arizona. And in 1996, 3 Associates of Applied Science degrees in Mechanical Drafting, Electromechanical Drafting, and Advertising, Art, and Computer Graphics from Pima Community College. I held about 4.0 average in all of those. Since I see my time's almost up, let me just skip down here. At one point, a government psychologist determined that after one interview, which included a lengthy written test, that while very bright, I was probably always going to need medication, and I would never be able to hold a position in a normal work environment, and certainly not full-time. However, I've never been one really to rely wholly on others' opinions of my capabilities. I learned about my disorder and decided that I wasn't about to throw away all that I had worked so hard for. Others had learned to overcome such a diagnosis and were living full, meaningful lives. I figured I could, why shouldn't I give it a shot? Okay. So I became a member of COPE, that is a client of COPE. I had a support team which consisted of a nurse practitioner, case managers, and people who believed in me and believed that I could recover. Then I had family groups, support organizations helped me with anxiety, depression, social skills, and gave me encouragement, helped me improve my self-esteem and confidence, and it all went at my pace. And then having a meaningful place in the workplace has helped me pursue my recovery. In 2005, I graduated from the first RSS Institute. Being a minority, I already understood the power of words and that they could be used to crush the spirit or uplift it. The Institute was led by people who also knew this and taught us to use the empowering language of person first, terminology that recognizes and respects that people's diagnoses do not define them or who they have the potential to become. Societal practice has made labels such as schizophrenic, borderline, and an addict carry with them negative, demeaning connotations. The insight and ability to acknowledge this truth and to encourage the use of respectful language and ideas about individuals with disorders went a long way in gaining my trust and appreciation for the RSS program and an open-mindedness to becoming part of it. I have social phobia, but I am not a social phobic. If you told me 12 years ago that I would be working closely with clients and professionals, leading groups, and especially speaking to an auditorium of people, I'd have been convinced that you were the ones that needed psychiatric help.
And for our third panelist, we've got Jean Bishop.
The first time I gave this speech, I had 20 minutes, and I'm 51 now, and I don't know if I can do it. I don't have 20 minutes. So I shifted it down a bit. It doesn't start with a log cabin or anything. I don't know if you noticed, but my main coping skill is humor. I was raised to be shy, naive, a virgin, and stupid. And when I'm asked the standard questions in a psychiatric interview about my childhood, nobody knew the truth. I told the truth, but nobody got it. The 3 words I like to use were normal, fine, and okay. My childhood is normal, and what that means is verbal and emotional abuse with spankings, which, of course, they don't leave a mark, so they're not really abuse, unless you're the one getting them. And my relationship with my family is fine, because they live in Massachusetts, and I live here for a reason. School, I did okay. I finished not last out of 700. And I didn't kill myself after 12 years of daily bullying, and I find that that's okay. I don't know how a mother who raises a child to be stupid expects that child to go to college and become a nurse, just like her. But that was my life programming. I was terrified. If I'm this stupid, that's the dumbest thing I could do. Well, I knew that, social misfits, juvenile delinquents, and idiots go in the military because that's the only place you can find a job. So I enlisted in the Air Force. And my mother was horrified because she didn't raise 2 sons. She only raised 1. Well, we all know the Air Force and all military makes a man out of you. And I stand before you. A man. When I got to basic training, I was terrified just like everybody else. But I discovered I had a skill that a lot of people didn't have. You've maybe seen movies where the TI gets his teeth right up here next to your face. It raises his volume so the back of your hair is flapping. I just stood there, and I waited till he came up for air. And then he was yelling again. He says, "What do I have to do to get a rise out of you?" And I said, "Well, you sure got to yell louder than my mom." So basic training wasn't easy. It was possible. I discovered it was a mind game, and they're not that good at it. I learned something I didn't know before, and that was if I try and if I believe in myself, I have a chance at success. And if I start off knowing that I cannot do something, I will prove myself right. And basic training was interesting. Thank you very much. Basic training was that moment. I still knew I was stupid and I couldn't figure out how I was excelling. A month after I got to my first base, I was raped. I had no support system. This is how I discovered the sperm delivery system from my sexual education, which, of course, was missing a piece. That was 9-year-old tiny question, jumps up to the eureka moment, just at the moment of penetration, and I was like, oh, you can laugh, please. It's funny. Honestly, I can't survive something without finding a piece of humor. And that's funny, honestly, isn't it? Didn't you want to laugh? The justice system, well, first of all, there's a difference between the justice system in the military and the civilian world. In the civilian world, I don't have to report a crime. I don't have to testify. And I can change my mind and say it never happened. I can also get up and move and change my name, change my address, and do a lot of things. In the military, I have no rights. This is essentially a court case about destruction of military property. I have no rights. The questions included, how did you cause this? What were you wearing? What did you expect? This is the military is for men. And slut, you're supposed to wait till marriage. I kind of took that one to heart. They offered me an administrative discharge for failure to adapt to military life. I asked them to explain to me and show me a contract that said that was one of my jobs. I'm very fortunate in that I have a bullshit detector. And when my psychologist that I was forced to go to told me that the leading cause of rape is low self-esteem in women, and that to get over the nightmares, I should have sex with as many men as possible in as short a period of time as possible. Okay, maybe that's why all the women he meets have low self-esteem. My bullshit detector rang. I managed to somehow ignore what had happened and to bury it and to become extremely strong and very capable. I was promoted to E6 Tech Sergeant in under 10 years when the average in my career field was over 16. I'm accused of having delusions of grandeur, but they do not give you medals for that, and I have a chest full. I must have been doing something right. The bipolar symptoms began, and I thought it was a gift. Can you imagine speeding up and thinking so quickly, my God, it's fantastic. Like I said, 10 years, right? How is that a disability? They put me in charge of a computer installation team. The Air Force in our squadron was moving from stone tablets to the mainframe. And I was determined to be a computer guru, a genius, because I had no training, but I owned a Commodore 128 computer at home. Now, here giggles, so some people are old enough to remember that is made by Mattel, and it is similar to, it is the Easy Bake Oven of computers. And I got a medal with a letter of reprimand attached to it because I didn't have the authority to do the things that I did, but I succeeded. I was put out for being bipolar with PTSD. And I carried that with me until I met Dr. Stone King, who, like for Arrow, helped me learn that I am a bipolar. Well, hello, thank you. I'm nervous. I don't know if you can tell. She helped me change from a bipolar with PTSD to a person with bipolar disorder and PTSD. And while one of my major strengths and coping skills was to determine that I was a professional mental patient, I'm not really allowed to use that term anymore. I am a certified recovery support specialist.
Quickly, Arrow, what do you see for your future?
Well, as I said, I'm going to be graduating in March of 2013. I will be certified, when I graduate, I'll be a certified rehabilitation counselor, working with people of all disabilities and abilities. I am looking forward to my doctoral work either here at the University in Rehab Counseling Education or with the University of Medicine and Dentistry in New Jersey. Did I say that right? Okay. Pursuing a degree, one of the first, I think it is the only in the nation, is it not, in psychiatric rehabilitation, a doctorate. I'm also looking forward to bringing supported education to the University of Arizona for people who live with serious mental illnesses.
And Linda, what do you see for your future?
I want to continue doing groups and creating them. I have been asked to sit on a panel of professional healthcare providers at COPE to help find different approaches to help people through their recovery, people that have been having a particularly difficult time of it. So I look forward to doing that also.
And Jean, what's up for your future? A comedian?
Oh, yeah. Well, I am naturally, but don't quit my day job. I recently resigned from my VA volunteer gig. I've worked there for almost 2 years, and they allow me the privilege of being the lunatic who works for free, so I don't need to be paid. And they allow me to do 1/3 of what I was taught to do at the RSS Institute and what other people are doing, whether they're volunteers or not. When I mentioned my disappointment, they kept telling me that my self-stigma was coloring my perception of reality. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I don't really kind of react to stuff like that real well. What I finally realized was that their perception of my self-stigma was stunting my growth. And I was trying to persuade them to grow the hell up. And I decided maybe I should do that. So I've resigned 2 weeks ago. I'm looking for a job as a certified recovery support specialist where I can sit down with people and do what I intended to do at the VA, to walk in and say, I'm Jean Bishop, I am retired Air Force, I have bipolar disorder and PTSD, and I walked the swamp, and I can show you how to walk it too.
These are my teachers. When we listen to people, they will let us know what what helps them move forward in their recovery and what gets in the way. I know this from the inside out. It hit my grandfather's generation, my father's generation, and me. So, do you have any questions?
Yes. Thank you. First of all, thank you for sharing your story.
Could you bring her the microphone?
Yeah, Jean.
I'm also a peer mentor for you who are here tomorrow.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. It was very encouraging. I noticed that all of you are very smart, and that you mentioned something about cognitive. I forget what it was. It was something, the gap above 50 and cognitive ability. So I wonder if you have any comments on that.
Here in Arizona, there's what's called an SMI entitlement program. And in order to be in that SMI entitlement program, and it is an entitlement, when I came to Arizona after 17 years in California, where I did my internship in psychology at UC Davis, I was appalled that people walked up to me and said, "Hello, I'm an SMI." It took me a while to figure out that this entitlement program was a result of a lawsuit, that Arizona refused to accept Medicaid because they didn't want to pay the match. And so they're just people in Arizona were not treated for behavioral health issues. So the SMI entitlement program, you have to have a global assessment functioning score of 50 or less, and you also have to have an impairment in functioning. And that makes you eligible for services. Very good question. And SMARTS is self-management and recovery training. It is a cognitive self-help group. And the Wellness Recovery Action Plan is a crisis relapse prevention tool that was developed by Mary Ellen Copeland, who has her PhD, is also a person with lived experience of psychiatric disorder. Her mother was as well. And she developed the WRAP, and it's internationally used. The WRAP, Wellness Recovery Action Plan, WRAP, is very commonly used in behavioral health. Other questions? Comments? Good thing I have Camp Wellness.
Very good. Hello. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, because as another human being, I really honor that. Honor you sharing who you are, which is sometimes still considered not okay. I am a mental health professional, and it's also my observation and my own experience that many of us, just like of many people in humanity, have gone through horrendous and traumatic experiences, come from backgrounds of addiction, through the family trees or through your own experience, also have mental illness. It is important to distinguish between someone's diagnosis and who they are, but it does get what we call pathologized. You're a medical term. You're a diagnosis, you're a disease, you're a problem, you're something that's wrong instead of what's right. So I just want to let you know that the professionals are in the same boats you are. They just don't talk about it. Thank you.
Trust me, I am a professional. I know that. Sure.
I had the distinct pleasure of going out to a peer program back east in Endicott College last year, and it was a conference, and it was peer specialists from all over the country getting together, and I experienced stigma there because I was looked at as the professional, not as the peer first, but as the professional, as someone that we need to make sure, this guy understands, or whatever their agenda was. But so stigma exists even within the peer movement, within behavioral health, and I think I don't know the exact numbers. I'm sure Dr. Stoneking has them. We all know that stigma appears most within the medical community, within the behavioral health community, more so than it does in the general public.
The facts are that 10% of individuals in the population are affected by mental illness. 7 to 8% are affected by serious mental illness. There is a biological hereditary component. There is also a biological and hereditary component to substance use disorders. We don't say substance abuse anymore because substance use disorders covers all of the major diagnoses. Substance abuse is one of those diagnoses. So that's why we use substance use instead of the diagnoses of substance abuse. Any other questions or comments?
First, I see how you stay thin, Beth, running up and down the aisles here. I can't help the feeling, as I'm listening to you, that you are exceptional individuals. There is a literature on invulnerable children, and it's a challenge to figure out what. And I think that all of you started from very early with something that immunized you against things that would have destroyed and have destroyed many other people. Some kind of strength that, with all the terrible things that have happened, brought you to this wonderful moment that you're in. Would you care, any of you, to reflect on what it is in your early life that gave you that gem that has brought you to this point?
One of the things that I think about, well, actually there's two things. The first one is the whole idea that women cannot, and people have a list. The first time I heard that, I was very young, and my mother yelled, "Girls can't climb trees." And I yelled back, "I'm not climbing down." And right then, I mean, even for a young child, that's got to be stupid. And so I had, So that's what I call my bullshit detector. And it started very, very early. The other thing, my dad and my mom have this passive-aggressive thing going. And child rearing is, of course, women's work. And reading books to children is part of that. She wanted him to. He didn't. So he would read this children's books to us, and it was always the same story. It didn't matter what the picture was. And the story is very short. Once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs, Flopsy, Mopsy, and Billy Goat Grubb. The story has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. And they lived happily ever after. So as I was being raped, I heard in the back of my mind his voice saying, it has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. And I just held my breath, and it ended. And every time something's difficult, I hear his voice.
I think you heard in all our stories, at least I noticed, that there was, like you said, some sort of trauma that occurred early on. And I know for me, it's made me extremely strong. I had to learn at a very young age how to survive inside myself, let alone with everybody else around me. I had to become creative. I had to, shift from this world into another and be able to see things a little bit differently. Because if I looked at things straight on, as bad as they were, I would have gone crazy. That's a word that we're not usually allowed to say. But yeah, so it's that you learn to adapt very early on. You learn to grow strengths that other people don't have. You learn to find those strengths inside yourself. So I don't know if that's the immunization you were talking about.
I'm not exactly sure. Since I think that I probably had the social phobia from early on, I would say that mostly my parents' love and my siblings, and not that they knew that was going on, but simply acceptance, and also my ability to find things to do. And I had it. It just flew away.
And I'll kind of share mine. When I was young, I would go visit my grandmother, my father's grandmother, and she would say, "Beth, you're odd. You are really odd. Why aren't you like your sister?" And so I thought, well, so I ran home and I said to my mother, "Mother, what is odd?" And out comes my mother's mother, who said, "Who said that to you?" And I said, "Da-da-da-da-da." And she said, "When you're odd, the odds are in your favor." And I said, "Cool." And Mom said, "Who said that to you?" And I said, "Don't worry, it's a compliment." And from then on, I always remembered that. When you're odd, the odds are in your favor. And if you look at it, each one of us are never to be repeated unique selves. And diagnosis is an art, not a science. Prescribing is an art, not a science. Supporting is an art, not a science. But what really helps us to hit the mark and to support people is we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And when we listen to people, they will let us know. And short of danger to self or others, allow choice. Trial and error learning has been some of our best lessons. And so we may say, you may be careful or protect people from doing something. But short of danger to self or others, trial and error learning is so important, and choice. We don't tell people what they need. We listen to what they need. It's really turned my life around and the way I work around. And I get lots of positive feedback about that. Are there any certified recovery support specialists in the audience? Would you stand? And Beverly, you're a trainer? And Fran? We're grateful for the time, and thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? There's some handouts out there, and if you remember nothing else, remember the empirical data, and the possibility of recovery is 100%.